Ian, as always. You're muted.
Okay, so I put the recording on, and so just know that it's wonderful to share, and we would love for everyone to share where they're at, and also to remember that these do go up onto the YouTube, and hopefully in order to be helpful for others. So Shannon's been doing that for us, which is great. We're a little bit behind, but anyway, so here we go. Who wants to just check in? Renzi, how about you, since you're kind of new and we'd love to get to know you?
Yeah, sure. So, like I said before, my name's Renzi. I'm based out in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And yeah, even before the COVID pandemic was in our part of the world, I think that I and a lot of other folks in my Extinction Rebellion chapter were just kind of feeling alienated and a little bit like, I don't know, disheartened by all the conflict that was happening internally in the organization. And then the pandemic happened and the stay-at-home orders came, and now everything feels like, I don't know, like I'm trapped in this like in between dimension where everything's floating around me but nothing's really moving. It's a very strange feeling, and I know that might seem kind of bizarre, but it feels like, I don't know, yeah, like I'm stuck in between two different worlds, and I can't, there's no seems, and like there's no real clear way how to get from one to the other. And yeah, it's a lot of loss of momentum, a loss of feeling of direction, and I guess something that almost feels like burnout. We in Pittsburgh, we have been planning 3 pretty large actions around this time for Earth Day, and now of course they can't happen. So it's such a big letdown and such a loss of energy that I don't know, like I'm not sure what the future of not just of Extinction Rebellion, but of the whole eco-justice movement has in my neck of the woods. Everything just feels so like static. Okay. Thank
you. And Renzi, just to ask you, I got curious about something you said. It feels like I'm stuck between one world and another, and I was sort of curious, what are those worlds in your mind?
In my mind, it's like one behind me and one in front of me. The one behind would be the one that we were all working in before, and then the one ahead of me is what world we're going to have to deal with as climate activists and just as people living after, say, after the stay-at-home orders are lifted, or what kind of new economic hardships are going to be on the horizon, or like what new challenges when it comes to finding supplies or transportation or organizing outside of social media at all. It's it feels like this fuzzy area in between the past way of doing things and the future way of doing things, and we're it feels like this endless waiting for something to emerge. I don't know if that helps at all, but, but that's...
Well, I think you have the rest of the world in feeling the same way. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like going from the known, sort of in the known activist terrain, to the completely unknown future. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, okay, cool. We can talk about maybe how to be with that on this call. And who else would like to check in? Kristen, how about you?
Sure. Thank you. My name's Kristen, and I'm calling in from Salt Spring Island, BC, in Canada. And I was introduced to the three principles through you, Amy, through your radio podcast many years ago.
Yay!
And so that I always get a chuckle about telling that story, because here I am, Salt Spring Island, which is where Sid Banks, the founder of all this great knowledge, lived and worked, and no one's heard of him here. So, but I have been recently helping out at the Three Principles School. So I've really enjoyed that, because I really do want to give back in some way, but I don't feel like it's my role to be a teacher or a coach or any of those things. So it's nice to be able to help out in a small way like that. Myself, I'm a body worker, so I specialize in a technique called Bowen technique. So it's a soft tissue technique, and I don't know, I'm always really fascinated by kind of the parallels between, what we talk about in innate mental health, and how that equates to innate physical health as well. And I think it's all connected. It's all mind. So, as an activist, I'm kind of a joiner. So I love to participate in activist activities, demonstrations, but I'm not an organizer myself. I have two kids that I'm co-parenting, and so that really is my full-time job.
And how are you doing? Like, is there something on your mind? Are you just sort of pleasantly here and feeling okay? Or is there something going on for you in the midst of COVID-19 or in the midst of your own life?
Yeah, what I've been experiencing, I can only describe as just uh, like an ongoing 24/7 underlying anxiety. So usually I can function, and, I'm getting things done, but there's just this tension, this feeling underneath, this feeling of unease that all is not well. And it's very exhausting. So, I'll get to the end of my day, and it's like, oh, I just, I've sort of done the minimum, and I just feel so exhausted. And I just really, resonate what everyone's been saying so far, and just with the frustrations of, seeing all these actions, for the environment, and then just to see the infighting in these groups, and I just don't understand it. It's what, like, we all want the same thing, so why is it so hard? And then just see to what's happening on the political landscape. I just, for the longest time, I just shut it off. I just did not even pay attention what was going on. Mostly with what's going on in your country, Amy, and whoever else is down there. But yeah, and I don't understand how it's been allowed to get to where it is, and why people who are obviously not equipped for the job are allowed to stay there.
Yeah. Thank you. Shannon, how about you? Good to see you. It's been a while.
Guys. Yeah, I'm Shannon. I am also in British Columbia, so it's so nice to have a fellow. I'm in Roslyn, BC, Canada, so very, very cool to have a fellow British Columbian on the call. But yeah, I just showed up. I'm actually doing really well, all things considering. And my mind can kind of go to, like, why is that? Is it because I'm in an area that's relatively not hard hit by COVID? Like, yes, we're all still staying at home, but I'm definitely not I'm not in a big city. I'm not in the of it. I'm not, so I don't know if it's because of that or just because of other reasons, but I'm feeling really peaceful and really joyful lately and really grateful. And I do live in a place where I have kind of infinite nature access, and that has been a saving grace. When all of this started, I was visiting my parents in Vancouver, and I found it really hard to be in Vancouver when all of this was happening. And in some ways, it was crazy because this is the city I grew up in, and I was, able to drive somewhere and see 80% less cars on the road, and I was like, whoa, this is like kind of dreamy and lovely. But then coming back to where I live and having trails at my doorstep and living in the mountains has been really nourishing in these times, and something I'm really grateful for. So I'm not really here to get anything in particular. I just love hanging out with everybody here, and I love this conversation, and I'm just here to hopefully listen and add any wisdom that occurs to me. So yeah, thank you guys.
So I guess I can check in, and I think what I'd like to do is check in and also do some sharing at the same time, because I'm going through similar things to Renzi, and I can share some insights that I've had based on the principles, or just what I call the truth about life, or our spiritual capacities, our resilient capacities. Our local group over the last couple of weeks just fell apart. We were trying to meet, we were trying to adopt self-organizing systems. We had sort of an old guard of people who, including myself, who really, we just started it all, just sort of like, frankly, like a year ago on Earth Day, we had our first action. It was a die-in, and it was just 20 people, but still, and then we worked really, really hard to get to where we are. And suddenly there was a new group coming in, and they were saying, you're in power and you need to mitigate for power, and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, if this is power, you can have it, because just like, I don't feel like this is something like super valuable that I have. Like, it's just a lot of work, I'm a volunteer. And but the way that the complaints came in were very kind of hostile and angry. And so we were sort of like, well, we don't want to respond to that. We do want to respond to mitigating for power. But so basically just a big mess. And then things started to fall apart. And now people are leaving and sending in big resignation letters and all kinds of stuff. So the future of the group is really it's teetering. And we see that the future of the country is teetering, and the economy, everything's teetering right now. And I think for me, what's been most helpful is to detach from any outcome. I saw for myself that I thought that spiritually we would be further along. If you want to say emotionally, and our emotional intelligence would be greater at this time. And that would be reflected in our politics and our treatment of the planet and our treatment of each other. And what we're seeing, and I don't know if it's a majority or if it's even just a minority of very loud people, we're not seeing that happening. And I realized that I had this attachment to, via our activism, via our spirituality, via our emotional intelligence, we would just make it. And I'm not clear that we will at this point. It's not looking good. It could go in many different ways, and the current trajectory is not good. And so it's been an insight for me to see that I keep trying to make it good, and I just don't have that power. I don't have that level of control. And so the letting go and sort of realizing where the reality of things, that the local group could fall apart, that the US group could fall apart, that there's conflict at the global level, because I serve on the global support regenerative cultures team. And so we see conflict everywhere in XR too right now. And it may be the COVID is making it all worse, but I'm really encouraging people in my world to just be like, it's okay too if it falls apart. Like, because as long as we're holding on to this is how it should be, then there's all this thought energy crowding our minds that's stressful, that's about how can I fix it, how can I hold it together, what should we do, and just from a basic principles perspective, what we really need are quiet and open minds. We need our minds to settle down so that we can say, oh, well, XR is not making sense anymore for me, and this is making sense for me, or like sometimes I'm feeling like I should just work on the election. If we have any chance right now, it's to get this guy out of office so we have a little more breathing room for activism in the future. And I'm just sitting with that. So actually I'm starting to appreciate the fact that we are in conflict, if you can appreciate that, because we've said we're taking a month off, we're going to do mediation, see if that works, but we've canceled all meetings. And we're just letting everybody just chill out and deal with their own, like getting to the grocery store and, tending to their finances and their children and their families. And we're just doing regenerative meetings right now. We're just meeting, like on Saturday, we'll have a meeting like this for our XR group and sing songs and hang out and just chat, and we may go for walks with one another, the people in conflict. Like I'm reaching out to some of those people, let's just go for a walk, So it's just nice to let go of the expectation of how anything should be. And it feels like the climate crisis and COVID and everything is demanding that of us. Because if we keep thinking that we have to get out of shelter in place, or we have to all shelter in place forever, there's just so much unknown that our minds can't grasp onto any strategy right now, except for, what can I do? That, what's that serenity prayer, that God grant me the serenity to accept the things I can't change, and the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference, right? So, and sometimes we don't know, so we can be in the unknown for a while, and that can be uncomfortable, but it can, if we don't think that it's a bad thing to be in the unknown, then it can actually be okay, and actually be quite a fertile ground, because we're not attaching to any particular line of thought or strategy. And so we're actually opening the mind for a fresh insight, a fresh thought to come through that makes sense, that makes sense. And just for example, one of the thoughts we've had as a local group is maybe we should just give so we've made our statement about our position in public, and it felt really true to us. Let's just give it all to the new people. Let's just give it, which would not have occurred to us without really detaching from how we thought things should be. And I'm not saying that's just the local, a possibility in our local world. It has nothing to do with US XR or XR America, but that capacity to detach from the way we thought it should be just seems really, really crucial at this moment. So I had something else to say, but I've forgotten. So if anyone else wants to jump in with how does that sit, or is there a thought about that, or even a whole different line of thinking? Does that resonate for people? And I just want to acknowledge too that the underlying anxiety, I haven't found a way to completely escape. I mean, maybe if I could move in with Shannon and be out in the woods and like a Thoreau kind of a situation, But I'm not, I have kids and teenagers running around, and we have to shop and cook and do all these things for them. So, and, we're concerned about them and their mental health. And, it's, I just want to also put out that, like, I just think when I see people saying, like, I'm doing so great, even Three Principles people, because of their understanding, will say, oh, I'm just doing so great. It's such a great opportunity. I'm kind of like, be careful with that, because you may be doing great and that's great, but you may also not, be losing your job and looking at eviction, or be a homeless person with no place to go. I mean, I think that can be a weakness of spiritual people and spiritual groups, is that we don't fully face, and understand the context of world politics or climate crisis, and speak appropriately, appropriately. I know Linda Pettit told me, she said, well, Amy, one thing that I've gotten from your work is to contextualize my work properly, to just be like, this is, it's a serious time, and we're not just going to be talking about how to up your coaching practice, like, it just doesn't seem, it's not contextually appropriate right now. And, I also really love Gangaji, the spiritual teacher, and she had a bunch of us got together. We were invited to a little group session together in Northern California for volunteers who've helped her in the past. And so I was on that, and she got on for a minute, and she said, it's really beautiful that we can have this inner resource that we know, that we have this, in principles terms, this inner wisdom and this inner calm, regardless of circumstances. She didn't use those words. I'm putting words into her mouth, but that was the idea. And she said, I hope we don't forget that this is a trauma and a crisis for people, millions and millions of people around the world. And I just appreciated that, because when we did start to talk, there were still people who were like, oh, it's so beautiful to be, quiet and, not having a lot to do. And it did feel a little bit still like that just doesn't feel like, yes, and, yes, and we have compassion, and we can have sorrow, and we can have grieving, and we can have a sense of service, because people are suffering and people are dying, and all of it's true, the bliss and the pain.
Okay, if I share. Yeah. Yeah, I really resonate with what you shared. And I also think it's okay for people to want to build their coaching practice. People still need to earn a living, and especially now it's getting harder. I mean, I notice that I'm doing a lot of pro bono work, but I'm also conscious that I need to also run my business and pay a mortgage and feed ourselves and pay bills. So I see that those things don't seem at odds, don't have to be at odds, that we can be in service and be mindful of what we have, but also of what some don't have. And I agree with that. I think that's really important. And then there was something else I was going to share. It's just gone out of my head because I've got really quiet. What was it? Yeah, what you were saying about being attached to sort of outcomes, expectations of how it should be. I feel like we just are in a time of, it kind of is a bit like Renzi said, it is a little bit like we're in limbo. I also felt a real sense of momentum with the climate movement with activism, and felt like it just felt like there was momentum, and it felt great to see so many people waking up. I felt like there were more and more people waking up. We've got a lot of activism where I live, and lots of people growing. We're trying to grow our own food, and we're doing that here. And so there's been a lot going on, and I do feel like this virus and what's happening with COVID-19 feels like it's, and I'm only making this up, it's just a sense that it's sort of somehow superseded the climate crisis, when to me this is just a taste of what's to come. It's giving us a window into what happens when there's major disruption and things that we've taken for granted are no longer readily available. And so I do wonder what this is going to mean, and I'm also feeling more and more comfortable with just taking each day as it comes and doing what makes sense, and just listening to my own wisdom and listening to others, and trying not to kind of get ahead of myself about what may or may not happen, because I just don't think we know. But it doesn't mean that we can't take the next step that makes sense to us. So I love what you shared about ER and where you're at with that. And I feel like that's a nice metaphor for how we can be with everything in some ways, not being too attached to any particular form of anything when there's so much disruption right now. But it feels like it's also more important than ever to stay connected to wisdom, however that shows up for us. So I'm appreciating a lot of things at the moment, and I'm also really aware that there are so many different realities at the moment and so many different things going on in the world. So I guess that's why I'm just trying to be as much in service as I can be. Like, I've been working on my book, but it felt like I can't just hide myself away in a room writing a book when there are people that really could benefit or need a hand right now. You know, so I've been a bit conflicted about that, but I've found a way to kind of do both. So it's probably making me busier than I need to be, but it feels right. So
well, and I just want to clarify my opinion or statement too about the coaching. Of course, people who are coaching want to still build their practice. I get that. I think for me, it's more about there can be a sense of disconnect from just what's happening. It's like a lack of grounding or something in the realities of the world, you know. And that doesn't mean freaking out, and it doesn't mean, you know, it's sort of this la la happy yay kind of a tone to not all, you know, offerings, but some of the offerings that I see. And that's fine too. I mean, maybe people, denial has been very useful for many people.
yeah, it's a really helpful, it's a coping strategy.
Yeah, it's a coping strategy, right? It's like really almost like taking a drug, right? It keeps the mind from having to deal with what is. Yeah. And it's a lot what is. It's a lot. And yet, you know, I'm just going to put something out there as a point of discussion here, which is that I keep thinking about some things that Sydney Banks used to say, and some other spiritual teachers, not so much Gangaji, although I think she would say it differently, but that, you know, like no matter what your circumstance, your wisdom will guide you. And so we may not be able to control this huge outer reality. Maybe we can add our contribution, you know, our little contributions, but But, you know, does that mean that we can find a personal reality that works for us, even in the midst of all this chaos? I mean, I know that I can, through my state of mind, create a sense of peace in my house at this time, or not. That's me. That's me creating a lot urgency, worry, concern, or not, or being, and I'm not even going to take a lot of credit for being in a peaceful state, because I'm finding it to be random. Like it just randomly comes up and I'm like, oh good, phew. I'm good for now, you know. And that's been really cool to just at least know when I'm not good, because I've had moments on this couch, like holding my cat with my dog on my feet, just like I can't get up, I can't do anything, I'm not making dinner, leave me alone. Just really. So going in, you know, just knowing that it's gonna shift. It shifts, and so when it's feeling heavy, it's so nice to know that that's the temporary condition of our state of mind, based on our thinking and based on what's happening, because what's happening triggers our thinking, right? If there's conflict and we didn't want conflict in our group, we're going to have a lot of negative thinking and, you know, upset thinking. But again, that can shift, and suddenly it's like, oh, conflict, maybe the conflict is good. Maybe there were issues within, you know, the groups that needed to come out, to be explored. You know, that's what I see about the conflict we're in, is that this side is holding a truth, and so is this side. And if we can come together and share and those truths, we will grow as individuals and as a movement if we continue.
It's Amy, it strikes me that if wisdom is mind, wisdom, source, God, however we might think about it, if that's ever present, if that's the kind of one constant or one of the constants, then even in the midst of conflict, there's wisdom in that too. You know? So that just occurred to me listening to you all. You know, where's wisdom here? And how's it showing up? And what's there for us to see about this, whatever this is? Because there's always wisdom in everything. And like you've always said, which has always stuck with me, Amy, you know, there's truth everywhere. And sometimes we just have to listen and look for it. And I think when there's so much disruption and there's so much going on, it just feels even more important to listen and look for that constant, that anchor for ourselves.
We haven't, thank you so much, Chantal. I really appreciate that. And Steve Fullerton just joined on. We've had you on before. Steve, are you there? Do you want to check in? We've been doing some check-ins and just responding to where people are at. And would you like to check in and share your thoughts and feelings and where you are right now? And I don't know if we can see you or not, but we'd love to see you if you can do.
I don't have the picture on because my internet is what is known as a bit crap. So I'm just trying not to use up too much energy. And if I disappear, it's not that I did it on purpose. Okay, where am I now? Yeah, I keep thinking how we made it make sense that it's acceptable to be led by psychopaths and
You're breaking up a bit, Steve. We heard you say, how does it make sense? Something.
Oh, sorry. Like I said, my internet's not really great. I don't know. I'm just kind of thinking about waking up to what seems to be a recurring fact, that we keep allowing people who are very self-interested to persuade us to do things that don't make any real sense. In fact, convince us to act not in our best interests. And I suppose, what am I thinking? If we had more people actually understanding how they work, that there'd be less buy into stuff that they think is going to be helpful to them, but if they actually step back and actually could see that there isn't any help to be found in those things at all.
Do you have like an example? Are you coming from the UK or from the States?
Yes,
Uh-huh.
yes. Well, I'm kind of thinking in terms of the States right now, where you're having people protest about the stay-at-home orders and stuff, and they're happily walking around in close contact with each other because they prefer to believe man and the channel that keeps pushing it, that this virus is no more contagious or deadly than the flu. That they rather listen to those people than those who've been studying actual medicine, actual science. It just makes me kind of think, if you actually step back and kind of think, I don't know, you have a particular, you have a hernia or something, who would trust? A doctor who's trained in actually doing hernias, or you're going to go to Sean Hannity with his blowhard ideology of it's right because he says it's right sort of nonsense.
Right. So, Steve, I'm going to jump in because I want to bring it back to everything you're saying is everything we're concerned about in the United States, right? It's just seeming insane right now. And it's not everyone, right? I mean, how big are these protests? I don't think they're tremendous.
They're not really big,
yeah,
but it's because they're covered, it seems to be bigger than it actually is. So
I
we
guess
get drowned out, which is, how do we not get drowned out? How do we get people to realize just because they're noisy doesn't mean that they're right?
Well, I think you're taking that. I just want to jump in and say, because this is sort of an innate resilience, 3 principles webinar, thought about what to do is not something that we as a group are tasked with, we're like, but what we each can do after we get over the upset of seeing all of this, right, is to is to see what makes sense for each of us. You know, and it may be, and that could be anything, like either we, like what I do is I use my Facebook as a platform and I write essays on Medium, and I actually am trying to have dialogues with Trump supporters and interview them and yada, yada, yada. However, it's easy to get too busy in all of that and lose sight of really what we each can be most effective at. What we actually, and here's the thing that I'm sort of bringing up for myself is like, if the XR local group gets back together, is that really where I find my joy? You know, because even in activism, you know, I don't want to do it if it's not fun, you know? I mean, I know the problems are great and it takes courage and it takes work and it takes effort and all this stuff, but if it's going to wear me down, then it's not going to actually be effective. My part will not be effective. So I am sort of like, you know, what part can I play? And that's just a question. That's an open question that this COVID-19 has actually granted me an opportunity, you know, with the conflicts that have happened and this pause we put on our XR local group, and you know, just looking at Facebook, watching it, posting different things, seeing what happens and what kinds of dialogues seem to be effective or ways of approaching Trump supporters. And I haven't come up with an answer. So I guess I'm just taking it from Steve, you know, that we wouldn't form a little group to do this together. How can we change these people's minds? But that we each have our own possible role to play. And sometimes, and this is what I'm actually sharing with the Regenerative Cultures group in Extinction Rebellion, maybe our role is to actually stop doing everything for a while. Because we don't know what we're doing. We're running around like chickens with our heads cut off. And we're not feeling the groove of, oh, this is something that I can contribute to, that I can feel my contribution, you know, hitting its mark.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I find, I'm definitely nodding my head to what you've just said. And also I'm realizing that this week has been the first week where, as my head has been feeling weighted down and heavy about this kind of stuff. So, yeah, I have joined that club for the time being.
the weighted down and heavy club.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, you know, and I don't know when you got on this call, but we did talk about it's inevitable for most. I mean, and maybe not for some super enlightened human beings, but for most human beings, even with some degree of enlightenment, I just think right now it's inevitable. It's so fine, you know.
What you said, stepping back is going to be important, because you can't keep doing this 24/7. Nobody can do anything 24/7. So, yeah, that makes sense what you said.
And Steve, I'm just curious, what is your background in Three Principles and or activism?
Background was in the same mastermind group as Chantal back in the day, which Jamie Smart. Been up on climate sciences and the implications of said climate science. Discussions with people. Remarkably, I haven't felt like I should bash my head against the wall as yet, despite some of those conversations. Not any marches or anything like that. Not to say that I won't do it in the future. the easy stuff like signing petitions. Yeah, that's about it as far as it goes right now.
You know, it's interesting because just as an example, when we were thinking about trying to do actions, this is in, and this could apply, you know, you don't have to be an activist to be on these calls, right? So it could apply to just any project or endeavor that you're dealing with in your life. Extinction Rebellion was going to do a huge series of actions on Earth Day week, and plans were in the works and this and that. And then before that happened, we were thinking about, well, what kind of a target? And interestingly, I mean, I had the thought, we have to come up with this ourselves. We have to come up with a target. We have to come up with, you know, what we're going to, you know, the campaign. And then the chase actions started to happen. And that was not created by Extinction Rebellion. That was a Stop the Money Pipeline campaign. I think 350.org was part of that. But it just made perfect sense. I was like, oh, great. Someone came up with, and what we had been doing in our group was just doing the civil disobedience and learning the staying alive dance and having fun with that. And I was like, I'm down for that. Like, that is like, I have a lot of joy in dancing, and I'm totally down for learning that dance and teaching that dance. So we took the disobedience to Chase Bank right before the coronavirus hit. And we had this huge action that was a beautiful action. And there was so much joy. And we had 5 people were arrested in Chase Bank. And right before that happened, Chase Bank put out their internal report called Risky Business, in which they themselves said, and it's stated in that report, it's a really good document for activists because it was contracted by Chase Bank, #1 funder of fossil fuels. They said, you know, we cannot guarantee the continuation of human existence at this time. Okay, Chase Bank has said that. And I actually passed that along to Shaw at the Three Principles Conference in London, because we were having a dialogue and he wasn't sure about climate change. And when I passed that along to him, he said, oh, okay, I think I can trust this source, right? Because it was coming from Chase Bank. And so I think it really shifted his acceptance of the reality of climate change, which, I mean, it kind of seems ridiculous to have to even talk about this anymore, but it's amazing, the denial that's still out there. But my point is, maybe we're not the ones even who come up with the new plan, right? Like, we think we have to, because we're so used to doing that in our lives, we have to come up with a plan. But I'm sort of like, well, I could see some things that I could do, but I'm also looking out there to see if someone's come up with a better idea. Like when Greta showed up, oh my God, I was like, oh my God, yay. You know, like, she's really moved the dial, one person. So maybe it's not, like, I'm just talking about the burden of responsibility we have for figuring out not just climate change activism, but our lives. You know, when we don't know, we don't have the mental clarity, maybe it's okay to just take a rest, you know, and trust that something will arise without us even, you know, having to think about it. Does anyone, I don't want to keep talking. Anyone have any thoughts to share at this time? About any of that? Steve, I muted you because there were some noises. So if you want to speak, you can unmute. And anyone else? Questions or?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment about, yeah, what you have been saying about, like, trying to figure out what our responsibility for action is. And this is something that, you know, I've been grappling with for a long time. I just this feeling of always wanting to do more, wanting to do something. Like, I've got a preteen, I've got a teen, that's usually my life. And, so the conflicts I'm dealing with usually is between them, between me and them, and the reminder about, the in conflict, that getting into silence, that non-action is actually often the best thing. Of course, coming to that in the moment is a challenge, and it's the lesson that we keep learning and relearning. But on a larger scale, with activism and seeing what's going on, and I fluctuate, like I see the amazing things that people are doing to spread awareness and actually to make changes. And one part of me is elated. It's like, wow, look at this great thing, these great things that are happening. And then the ego comes in and it's like, okay, well, then I feel down on myself because it's like, well, I'm not doing anything, so it's a very difficult dance. And then, or else, I'll start getting excited about something, getting involved in something, thinking that it's going to make a difference. And then, say the action happens and it's like, wow, you have that high after that, and then nothing changes. And then, going into that feeling of, well, why even bother? So it's a dance.
And it's hard to know actually what the impacts are. We can't, it's almost like we can't know. Like we did that chase action and I'm like, okay, so what did that do? We don't know who may have seen that and is pursuing some other project that will be very effective, or just got inspired to, look into Extinction Rebellion and maybe get involved, or just saw that activism could be fun. A lot of people said that, like that was so great to see all this disco dancing, and so now I'm open to activism. And then who knows what outcome that may have in the future when more and more people are sort of open to activism, if that's all we're doing. So I don't know if we can even know what the outcomes are. And that speaks to me of, again, I'm just going to put this out there and I'd love to hear what people think. Can we just do what's in front of us? And if it's just tending to our children, accept that that's our wisdom and that's our right activity in this moment, in this day, in this week, in this month, and not worry or be concerned that we're not doing enough, because that's just thought, right? And just really, because what you're speaking to about silence, it's like we don't understand the value of silence. And when you said non-action, you said the violence, the silence and the non-action are so important. And I think of activists, right? Like for them to get, including myself, the value of silence and non-action, that would be huge. And it's not that I don't think all activists don't understand this, because there are some good, Buddhist teachers like Joanna Macy, and I hear about Eisenstein as well. But it is in that silence and that non-action. It's like, that is the regenerative well. That's the stuff. And you have no idea why you're there or what's going to come of it, or, but it's really, that is, if we don't have that at this time and the value of that, I feel like we almost can't make it without that, because there is so much happening. So the value of silence and non-action, just strikes me as, that's really the theme for me right now with my XR group in chaos. And what is the value of silence and non-action? the richness of that, and the way it opens our minds to the bigger picture, and or even just enjoying just without having the enjoyment of life, which comes from that silence and non-action, which can be silence and non-action in the midst of action, right? Like it can be the non-action of the mind in the midst of doing dishes or being in an action or whatever. Like it's so I'm just really just struck by that phrase, silence and non-action, and the value of that at this time, and the depth of even enjoyment we can have of life, which is so important because that's the antidote to burnout. And it's hard for activists to see that, because we're so focused on the goal. But it's just like with anything, right? When we're working as coaches with people in companies or corporations, which, I'm not really doing. And a lot of colleagues have actually stopped working with some corporations, which is great, I think, but let's say the goal is to make money for people. So the activist goal is to try to solve the climate crisis, right? And then the business coach's goal is to help people make money. But in either case, there's this end point at which we think people will then be happy. And that is the mythology of progress that we all share, right? That once we get to this point, this end point of achievement, success, and whatever endeavor we're involved in, we will then feel fulfilled. And so how beautiful to think that we can be fulfilled now, because that never happens, right? It never happens that we feel fulfilled. Chantal's got a book out that's published, and I don't know, Chantal, after that book was published, did you feel fulfilled every moment of every day? Are you
but that's an important point, because I didn't have I need to write a book in order to ... The book happened, with a lot of hard work, but it wasn't, it was never about fulfilling anything apart from, it was only ever about being in service. So yeah, what occurred to me just now listening to you was, and that includes the climate crisis, that includes the climate emergency, because we can get urgent about that. I can't relax, I can't feel okay until I know we've done X, Y, and Z. And or for Renzi, is it possible for you to feel peaceful and settled and well, because you are, that's at your core, regardless of the limbo or the fuzziness or your well-being and peace of mind can coexist with the fuzziness and the uncertainty and I think that's been so helpful for me to see that things can be uncertain and there can be limbo, and I do recognize that I could relate to what Renzi was saying about this being trapped between two worlds, but I see it slightly differently. But I felt like we were going along on this trajectory and there felt like there was momentum, and then COVID-19, and then it sort of feels like, oh, is that going to put us 4 steps back or something, or will it throw us 10 steps forwards? And I just don't know that we can know yet. And can I feel at peace and enjoy my garden and enjoy my dogs and enjoy my friends and conversations now and tomorrow and the next day, and also be conscious of what might be happening to our planet and what I can do to contribute, to be part of the solution, whatever the solution even means, So to see that I mean, for me to just keep coming back to the truth that my well-being is not conditional, my peace of mind is not conditional on anything, it just is. So I'm all up for the silence and the non-action. Not all the time, but to make sure there's enough of that to restore and to regenerate and to, you know, to rest. Sometimes we need to rest.
I did not expect this conversation to happen today. Yesterday was chaos because we had to put out a statement from our side of the conflict, and then there, you know, expect all these reactions and so on, and then I had terrible news about my daughter's boyfriend, and just terrible news, all kinds of things. I was weeping yesterday, to be very, very honest and very, very human. And what a gift to be able to come together and remind ourselves of what always is, in Gangaji's words. She talks about what is always here. And to me, that just means what we talk about in Three Principles as mental health, quiet mind,
Love.
wisdom, love, yeah. And what a beautiful, you know, I thought it might just be Chantal and I, because I didn't really put this out very much, and I almost forgot it was happening, you know, with the COVID and everything going on. So it just, I feel so grateful for every time we get on. Chantal, isn't it true? We're like, oh, we got to do that light on the horizon. Oh, there's another thing to do. And then we get on, and it's just always, it just feels really nourishing for me. And I hope it feels nourishing for everyone else. And we're putting it up on YouTube. In fact, I'm thinking, gosh, it'd be so great to share this one with Extinction Rebellion people now, especially because we're just all going through it, you know, and to not be attached, you know, not be attached. And from that non-attachment, we can move with so much more ease and in activism. Even if we stay in Extinction Rebellion, okay, I'm not attached to whether I have power or not, or this role or not, or it's just, you know, life is always moving. So to be attached is to get, like, you know, to get caught in a fishing line in the river when you're trying to go downstream, right? You're getting tangled up in something that you can't really hold on to. It's just keeping you from moving downstream. So any last thoughts? It's 11:20. We usually end at 11:30, but I feel like this has been a really, I mean, for me, it's been a really rich conversation, and I feel really grateful for it. Does anyone want to share any last thoughts or questions or anything? We're good then. Yeah, Chantal, what do you say?
Yeah, I mean, I would love to lay down and sleep right now. That's what I'd love to do. Renzi's like, yeah. What time is it where you are, Renzi, in Pittsburgh?
Oh, there we go. These days I always feel like I could take a nap. So, but yeah, it's a 2 in the afternoon, going on 2:30. So, but yeah, what time is it where you're at, Chantal?
7:20 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
It's not bedtime, and we're doing a family quiz now. And I just, honestly, I know this sounds terrible, but I'm so tired. I don't want to do a family quiz. Don't put this on YouTube in case they ever watch it. So I'll just listen. And I'll probably curl up and fall asleep. So thank you. This has been lovely.
Randy, I see you have kids too. So, and I just want to support and encourage you in you know, just so deeply listening to what feels good to you now, like whether you can take a nap or just you know, chill out, or whatever is feeling, a walk, or it's a lot. It's a lot, and I think just acknowledging it's a lot, and then being able to let go of some things, you know, because our well-being, if we don't have that, we've got nothing.
Yeah, I've really
always figured out that somebody's up.
Yes.
I have yeah, that's my daughter Zora. But yeah, I really appreciate this conversation. It's helped me put things into perspective more. I'm a very like get things done kind of person. I like crossing things off the list and feeling like things are moving forward. So this time has been kind of hard on me, but the words and wisdom that you all have shared has really spoken to me, and I think it'll help me out. So thank you.
Thank you all. It's been helpful to me too. Okay.
Amy,
Lots of
Amy?
love.
Lots of love to everybody. Lots
Ciao.
of hugs for everybody.
Thank you all.
Shannon, I'll be in touch. I'm going to write down the topics. I'm like, let's get these up again. So I'll be in touch. Ciao, everybody.
Love you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, Steve.
Goodbye, everyone.
Amy, I was wondering, are you still doing the Facebook Lives in the morning?